Hey, welcome to part 3 of my YouTube series on procedural nodes in Blender. Today what we're going to do is we're going to take the techniques we learned in part 1 and 2, combine them, make something a little more complicated, like this procedural texture you see here, and we're going to animate it. So starting off here, we're going to take a texture coordinate node, and we're going to place it on a plane here. And I'll just pop into rendered mode so we can see what's going on here. Just view it from the top. And we're plugging into the object output there. And I'm going to start by entering in a separate XYZ node. And we're going to build a circle. So let's go ahead and do that. Add in a math node. Change this to power. Duplicate that. Change these both to 2. Add them together. Oops. Put in another square root, and then finally a greater than. Okay, there we go. And what we're going to do, put this to 0.5. There we go, we got our circle. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a noise texture here, and we're going to place it in between here. So we've got kind of some crazy stuff going on here. Some crazy loops. We can adjust these values and see what happens. You know, it kind of zooms in and out with the scale. The detail just makes it more of a fractal pattern. It just kind of, there's not really much going on here, but then this distortion here does something as well, which is this weird pattern, which is what I decided to animate. So that's the value that we're going to tweak there. But for now, we're just going to set this at -10 on the bottom there, and why don't we just set this top one to 3 and this middle one to 2. It doesn't matter too much. Okay, we're done the first part. Okay, so next up what we're going to do is we're going to clean this up a little bit before it gets too complicated. I'm just going to organize this by holding down Shift, right-clicking and dragging through there. I'm going to select all these and hit Control-J and join these all together. And I'm going to hit N to bring up this shelf here, and I'm going to rename this Distorted Circle. There we go. Okay, so that is that first part there. And what we're going to do next is take a look at creating the eyelid here. So I thought that that leaf shape that we made in an earlier video looked pretty good. Why don't we try using that here? Just bring that down a tiny bit. Plug this in here. And if you recall, it's pretty similar. We're going to get rid of this noise texture. Plug in this guy here. And we're going to change one of these to a power. No, pardon me, absolute. Let's take a look at this here, see if it worked. And it did. Okay, great. And it's even in the right orientation, so that's good. And what we're going to do is we're going to add in another math node here to kind of manipulate this a little bit. I just want to point out something here. When I move this math node here, it stayed inside the frame. And you could leave it inside that frame if you want, but if you want it outside the frame, there's a nice little shortcut. Alt-P allows you to bring it outside. So it doesn't matter. I'm just going to bring mine outside because I feel like it, but you could do either one. So this multiply node here, I've set it up here, and it's just made the eye a lot skinnier. That's actually the opposite of what I wanted to happen. I wanted it a little higher like that. That looks pretty good. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this. We're going to make the inside of the eye here. Let's take a look. Move this here. And we're just going to make this a little skinnier. And that was the wrong way. Not even looking at it. Let's go like 0.9 maybe. Yeah, 0.9 looks pretty good. And now we're going to mix these two together. But one of these has got to change. I think this one, if we change this to less than, I think that's looking pretty good. Let's go to multiply. Set the factor to 1. Okay, that's looking good. One last thing I want to do is I want to just tweak these values a little bit. Why don't we go like 0.9 there? Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Pretty happy with that. And that looks good. Okay, so now we've got the first eyelid. So let's rename these frames here. I'm going to just name this eyelid 1. And we'll just call this eyelid 2 for now. Okay, there we go. So we also want to kind of think about this first texture that we made, this concentric circle texture. we don't want this to be everywhere on our image. And actually we just want it contained inside our inner eye piece here, which is going to be this area right here probably. We'll just think about that. We'll set up the last eyelid here first, and then we'll take a look at that. So what I did is I made the bottom half of the eyelid a little bit different in my render there, and we're going to try that here as well. Give it a bit more variation. I've selected this entire eyelid area here, and I'm just duplicating it. We're just going to pull this down so it's still connected to the texture coordinate node. Okay, so if you look at this guy here, it's the same shape still, and what we're going to do is we're going to add in another spot here, separate RGB, plug it in here, and we're going to get a greater than node and plug it into the Y value, because we want to separate this on the Y axis. Let's take a look. If I plug into this node, the top is white and the bottom is black, so we should be able to separate the image into those two halves, just like this. Let's drag this over here. We're going to take a mix node and not plug that into the color one. We're going to plug it into the factor here and change this to mix. And what that means is that the top socket here, color 1, is going to appear on the bottom of this image, and the bottom socket, or color 2, is going to appear on the top of this image. So right now they're the same. So if we plug these in, we can see that it's just going to be the regular image. But let's tweak some of these values here and let's see what happens. If we pull this down, we can see that that top eyelid coming down, and that goes up. It's a little high. Why don't we do like maybe 5.5, not 0.55 rather. There we go. And then let's just tweak this second value here. Maybe bring this in just a little bit like that there. Cool. I'm happy with that there. You could experiment to your heart's content and come up with something really unique, but you know, I'm totally fine with this here. Okay, so we've got the eyelid set up, and we've got this interesting concentric circle texture. But as I mentioned before, we don't want this texture to be over top of the entire object. We want it to mask it. So we're going to use this texture right here, the inner eyelid, to mask it. And we're going to do it the same way here. We're going to grab this mix RGB, duplicate this, bring it up, and we're going to plug just this value here directly into there, into the factor. And yeah, I'll just try and keep this clean. There we go. Look at that. And we're going to use that to mask this texture here. Plug that in there, change this value to white, and let's take a look. Okay, perfect. It worked. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to mix these two together, but we may have to invert something. Let's take a look. Let's just try mixing them together and see what happens. I'm going to set this to multiply, set the factor to 1, and yeah, it's not working because just one of these has to be inverted. And I think it's this one here. Let's look at the mix there. What we can do is add in an invert node and just place it right here. And what that effectively does, you see, this is, you know, white and black in the middle, and this is now black in the middle and white on the outside. And let's see if that's fixed it, and it has. Alright, the last thing I did is I created color for that inner eye part. The way we do that is pretty similar to what we just did. We're going to once again use a mask and use that to control the color. So let's just take a look. Right, yeah, basically this color here, there we go. We can control it right there. And the reason, again, is just because when we take this image, the black is in the middle, the white is on the outside. So this top color, it's going to be everywhere that there's black, it's going to show that color. Everywhere there's white, it's just going to show white again. So yeah, we could change this to any color, and the eye now changes color. Let's just go ahead and set that to orangey red for now, and we're going to mix it with this last bit here. Change this to multiply, change the factor to 1. If we wanted to leave it like this, this is already pretty cool, but if you want to take it a little further, I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to actually animate the eye. So the first thing I did is I actually animated this noise texture here. The keyframes, the way it works is, first of all, you need to make sure on your timeline that you're at the place where you want to set the keyframe. I'm going to use Shift left arrow to bring it back to the beginning, and I've got 100 keyframes laid out here, and you can change that right here. Click this, change it to 250 or 25 in this case, back to 100, and it doesn't matter. I've got mine set to 100, and I've got mine set to 1 at this point here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over this input area where it says distortion, and I'm going to hit eye, and it's turned yellow, and I've got this little diamond down here, and that means my keyframe has gone in there. So the next step is I'm going to drag this to 100, or I could have also gone Shift right arrow and bring it to the last frame, and I'm going to change this value to +10, and I'm going to hit eye again there. Let's see what that looks like. Bring it back with Shift left arrow and just hit spacebar to play the animation. We'll see it playing on the right. So that's kind of interesting. One thing is that whenever you set up your animation, the animation curves will not be straight. So I'll show you what I mean. Let's go into the graph editor here, and if you look at the animation, it's got this curve to it. It starts out a little flat, and then it gets steeper, and then as it ends, it flattens out again. So what this does to your animation is it starts out slow, then goes fast in the middle, and then ends slow. And if you want this, that's totally fine. I'm going to change it though, because I want a more consistent animation where it just goes kind of the same speed the whole time. The way I do that is just in this image here, I'm going to hit A to select everything. Then there's a couple ways to do this, but the way I'm going to do it is hit V, and then I'm going to select Vector. And as you can see now, it's just done a straight line here for this animation. So I'm going to go back and play the animation, and it should look a little different. I'm going to go back to my timeline here and just move this down a little bit. So we've got our first part of the animation handled there. Alright, the next thing we can do is try animating that eye so it looks like it's blinking at us. The way we're going to do that is we're going to just animate these nodes here. If we tweak this here, you can kind of see it raises and lowers this eyelid here. We want to be careful not to show any white back there. I think we can handle that though. So I'm going to make sure my timeline's set at 1, and I'm going to hover over this value in the multiply node and just hit I. We've captured a keyframe there. I'm going to grab that keyframe and just delete or duplicate it, pardon me, bring it to 40, then bring it to 60 as well. I'm going to hover over frame 50, set this to high number like 100, and go ahead and hover over this value and hit I. So now I've got 3 keyframes that are the same at 0, 40, and 60, and that's not quite at 60. I'm just going to move it over to 60. And then the one in the middle is where it's blinking. And this is just the top eyelid, but let's see what we've got here so far. Alright, looks good. I'm happy with that. I'm going to go back to the beginning of the timeline, and now we're going to adjust the bottom eyelid here with this value. Once again, I'm going to hit I to capture a keyframe there. I'm going to duplicate it, put it at 40, and put it at 60. I'm going to hover over 50, set this to a high number like 100, hover over this input here, and just hit I. Let's see what we've got. Okay, cool. I'm pretty happy with that. You could keep tweaking it for a while and come up with a lot of variations, but I'm just going to leave it here and move on to the next step. Alright, so the next thing I did is I animated some color changes here. Let's take a look at how we could do that. And we can actually animate these colors in this Mix RGB node, which is pretty cool. And it's the same way as before. We basically hover over this input field and just hit I. We've got the timeline at 1, which is where we want it. I'm going to hover over this red here and hit I, and look at that, we've captured it just like that. So we've got that keyframe at 1, and I'm going to go ahead and set that keyframe to 100 as well, just so we kind of return to the same spot at the end. And let's just go at 25 level increments here. So frame 25, We'll just choose a second color here, nice green color there, and just hit I for that keyframe, and then go to 50. We're going to hover over this. Let's go with something blue and hover over this input field, hit I, and then go to 75. We're going to go ahead and grab, I don't know, some purple color there. So hover over that, and nope, hover over this and go ahead and select that keyframe. Alright, let's see how it works. Go through our animation, and now we've got crazy eye blinking and changing colors. So what I did next is I actually added on an array modifier here, and I did a little offset there. Let's do to 2, and then I've got 10 running here, and then I had 10 more. Let's just copy this. It's 10 more in another direction here. Instead of that, it was 1.2 in the Y direction there. So there we go. That's my basic setup there. I'm going to go ahead and apply both of those array modifiers, and we just want to set the geometry to the middle here. So let's take a look at the search function. I'm just hitting F3, and it brings up this search function, and I'm going to search origin. These have these shortcuts, Control Alt Shift C, and it did work, and then Blender updated, and I haven't set it back, but this is the second best way to do it. And we're going to set origin to geometry. That's just going to place our origin in the very middle there. And what we need to do is figure out a way to get it across all of these planes here. And I think the easiest way to do that is just to open up the UV editor here. Make some room, move down the timeline. We don't need that for a second. And I'm just going to project from view just like this. And I'm just going to scale all of this up just like this, so it's actually just like this. Because if you recall in the UV editor, this is actually the origin point. And I'm going to swap from object to the UV output. And look at that. There's our eye. We can press play, and it's now playing on all these planes. We're pretty much there. We're pretty much done this one here. I'm going to close up this area here, just join these areas in, and bring up this a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to add on a display, or not display, a displacement modifier, just like this here, and just create a new texture. We'll leave that strength as it is for now, but we'll probably change it, and we're going to come over here and just choose clouds. And as you can see, it's already kind of distorting my mesh a little bit there. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and go back to the beginning of the timeline, and we are going to control this size here. We're not going to make a huge change here. We're just going to go like 0.25, set a keyframe there, and then I'm going to go to 100, and then we're going to go to 0.26, and I'm going to set another, not there. I'm going to set another keyframe on size there, and let's see how that looks. So it's doing that curve thing again here that I was talking about before. I'm just going to change that here. Go into the graph and just go to vector. So now it's more of a consistent animation. Go back to my timeline. And yeah, pretty happy with this. This looks fine. We could change it around. We could make it more movement, bigger movement, whatever. But this looks good to me here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move this just over here, and then duplicate it, bring it over here. And now we've got two eyes, and if we play the animation, they're both in sync right now, so I'm going to change that. On the animation on the right, I'm going to create a new material, because if I don't create a new material and start changing this one, it's going to change this one as well. So I'm going to move over here. I'm going to take these 3 frames in the middle and just move these 2 frames over, just like that. Same with this here, like that. Just make those, no, they're not synced up. There we go. Make sure those are synced up there. Looks good. So what this did is it just made it so the eyes don't blink at the same time. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, I'm good with that. That looks good. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the color on this second eye so it's not synced up. Let's go ahead. We're on frame 1 there. I'm just going to go ahead and change this color. I'll start out with green. So eye, and what's going on here? Oh, okay, there we go. I just needed to click on the mix node there. And now we're here. I'm going to go ahead and click on this guy, go to green, and hit I, and that replaces the old keyframe. Go to 25. Instead of green, we're going to go back the other way to red or orange. Click I, go to frame 50. Instead of blue, we're not going to be working with purple. Go to 75. Instead of purple, let's go to blue, greenish, and then for the last keyframe, we'll actually just duplicate this first one here. I'm just going to get rid of this, duplicate this, and move it over. So let's see what we've got here. So everything looks good except for this displacement, and I'm not sure why. Okay, it looks like for the displacement we don't have any movement there. So I'm just going to go ahead and, yeah, it looks like 25 and 25. Let's go ahead and set this to 26 or 0.26. Not sure what happened there. And this one here, same thing. Okay, let's see if that worked. Okay, and it did. There we go. We've got our animation. We've got the eye texture that's now blinking and animated with color changes, and it's all on these little planes that are kind of moving around.